So today we're going to talk about politics and a little bit of religion. If that gets boring, we'll start talking about sex and money. Try and keep it light. It's supposed to be good. Chill like that. But yeah, we're going to talk about politics quite a bit in this talk. We'll talk about discrimination in the second talk. But when we talk about politics, what do economists bring to the table, basically? And this is a combination of what's called political economy, right? The marriage of politics and economics. So I want to share with you three different things today and ultimately culminate with how government tries to help the poor and how government clearly harms the poor. We start with just some really basic concepts here. If Naomi is a fan of government in general, then it must be that she believes that they're knowledgeable enough to make a difference and that they're well motivated enough to make a difference. Right? If Sam's not a fan of government in general, but he's a fan of government in this area, it's still the same thing. He must believe that the government is knowledgeable enough, people that are going to do policy, and they're well motivated enough, right? They're honest, they have integrity, they're objective, they want the best for society. Whenever we want government to do something, we think it's better than markets. We think it's better than people being allowed to exercise their freedom. And when we think government can do that effectively, it's because we think they have the knowledge and the motives to pull it off. What if they don't have, let's say they have the motives, they're good people, but they don't have the knowledge that would be ideal. What kind of policies will we get from them? They have the motives, but they don't have the knowledge. Will the policies be good, and what will we say about them? So, what do we think here? Hey, so what do you think? Is that going to be good policy?
Not if they have good, like no knowledge of it.
No knowledge. So what we might give them credit for something, all right? We might say, well, at least they had, anybody? Good intentions. Good intentions kind of bother economists because we want good outcomes. I mean, good intentions, I guess, you get 2 points for that or something. But we're after good outcomes, right? I want you to make good decisions in your personal life, your business life, public policy. It's not good enough. It's not good policy. So, not good policy, right? You got the motives but not the knowledge, right? So reverse that. Let's say you got the knowledge, but your motives are jacked up. What kind of policy are you going to get then? Okay, what are we going to get then?
Bad policy?
Bad policy of what kind?
Bad intentions?
Bad intentions, right? So maybe we would use terms like greed or corruption, right? If they're smart and evil, that's not good either. So the two choices so far are dumb and well-intentioned. That's not going to be good. Or evil and smart. That's going to be bad policy. What if they don't have either good knowledge or good motives? I don't know what that is, but I don't want to see that, right? Now I got dumb, evil people. It might be kind of fun to watch on YouTube, but that's not going to go very well, right? So back to my original point, when we invoke government, we must believe that their knowledge and their motives are okay. So the realm of knowledge is something that there's a field in economics called Austrian economics. I don't know if you've heard of that before. But they wrestle with what's called the knowledge problem. And they talk about it in the context of markets, right? If you think about the number 5 meal that you bought at McDonald's this morning on the way in, and you think about the millions of people who are involved in making that trade happen, right? Everything from the sausage patties to wherever those eggs were cooked across the country, and then it was put in a steamer that someone made, and it was driven on roads by cars and trucks that literally millions of people were involved in. And so they take all the information in our consumer preferences, and they map that with all the information that's required to actually produce the number 5 meal. And all that information comes together in the form of markets. And markets do a beautiful job of organizing that. Not perfect, but they do a wonderful job generally of organizing that information. So Austrian economists spend time talking about that. They'll talk about the invisible hand of Adam Smith. They'll talk about the unspoken dialogue of the market. And why do people do what they do? But in particular, how do markets handle the knowledge problem? When we invoke government, we have the same issue. So I wrote an essay about a year ago called I Pothole, and it was based on the classic Austrian article called I Pencil. I Pencil was about how complicated it is to make a pencil. Even something as simple as a pencil, no single person knows how to mass produce a pencil. Because the eraser is made in one place, the little metal things one made in another place, the yellow paint's made in another place, and then it all kind of comes together, right? So the pencil was an example that Leonard Read used to talk about the knowledge problem in economics. I did I Pothole about the complications of making potholes. And you think about what's it take If you're the bureaucrat in charge of pothole maintenance, what do you need to know to fix the pothole? And I go through all the things you need to know, things like the materials you use to fix the pothole, how much capital do you need, is it a two-person job or a four-person job? Where is the pothole? How do we find out where the potholes are at? Is fixing a pothole in Richmond, Indiana different than fixing one in New Albany, Indiana? Doesn't matter if you're doing it in November or June, right? There's a bunch of stuff that you're like, actually that's a little more complicated than I would have guessed. I mean, it's just a pothole. But fixing potholes turns out to be more complicated than one might have assumed. And so then the kind of the punchline of the essay is that, well, if potholes are really complicated and we're not sure bureaucrats have the knowledge to make that happen, how much knowledge do you need to run, say, the national healthcare system? And we don't have time for that, right? Because the amount of knowledge that it would take to run all of that, from chiropractic services in Wyoming to allergy shots in Vermont to $4 prescriptions to pharmaceuticals to hospitals, it would make your head explode, right? So when people bring in the government or want to bring in the government there, they're saying in essence, I think government is smart enough, knows enough to make the world a better place. Now we go to the motives question. What's motivating the people in political markets? And the field of choice there is called public choice economics. And public choice started from the idea that in poli-sci and in economics back in the day, that we were assuming that the only thing that drove them, the only motivation they had was the public interest. And a bunch of economists, James Buchanan, Gordon Tullock, and others at George Mason, went on to say, well, wait a second, we don't assume that in any other area of life, right? I mean, Gage, why are you here this morning?
It's my teacher told me to.
Your teacher told you to, and there's some kind of carrot or stick arrangement there, right? You're responding to incentives. Sam, why are you here today? Same thing.
Yeah.
Are you? I never expect to hear this answer. I'm here for the good of society. That's why I'm here. I never hear that, right? I always hear stuff. I ask my students, what are you doing here today? And they're like, well, I'm trying to get a degree. Okay, why do you want a degree? Because I want a better job. Why do you want, okay. We kind of press that out, and you're doing it for you, right? You and your family and other people. That's what you're motivated by. But in the 1950s and the 60s, somehow we were assuming that politicians never thought about themselves. All they thought about was us. All they thought about was society. And these economists said, wait a second, that's absurd. We don't assume that in any other facet of life. Why would we assume that in the one area where we give people power over other people? Why would we suddenly assume their motives flip, or that the motives of people attracted to power are going to be exceedingly selfless? That just seems absurd, right? And so they began to wrestle with that, right? What are politicians motivated by? Some of it is public interest, but what are some other things that politicians are interested in? So, Braden, what else do politicians want? Money. They like money too. I mean, that's okay. Evan, what else do they like?
Power.
Power's kind of fun. And the dude in the hat, I should know you. Mason? No, Mason's there. Oh, Lane, hey, I like you. What else do politicians want? We just had an election a couple weeks ago. What was that about? Well, not just the president, right? It's all these people who want to keep their job. Anybody have a job in here? Anybody want to keep their job? I mean, yeah, I want to I want to get promoted. I want to make more money, right? And these economists say, wait a second, that's what politicians and bureaucrats want too. They want to keep their jobs, they want to make money, they want power, they want perks, they want all the things that all of us do. They're just mortal like the rest of us. So again, the question of, do politicians and bureaucrats have the knowledge that's going to make them effective? Do they have the motives to be effective? So public choice economists use a tool that is super powerful and helps us get to the question of the topic today. Let's say we take $1 from 300 million people. We're going to redistribute that in $30,000 chunks to 10,000 people. Very simple model. It's a costless transfer. We're not really talking about how the money gets from A to B, but we just have this easy description of $1 from a lot of people redistributed to a smaller group of people in big chunks, right? $300 million transferred from party A to party B. Tell me about what these people think about this policy. Happy or sad? What do they think about this?
Probably not too thrilled about it.
Not cool, right? What are they going to do about it? right? I mean, econ, we start with preferences, but then we want to go to actions. What are they going to do about it? To try and prevent this from taking place, to stop the policy, to overturn the policy. What do you think they'll do? Johnny, what do you think they'll do? Complain, okay. To who?
To whoever they feel has influence over the situation.
So they're gonna like go to take a trip to Indianapolis and make an appointment?
I mean, they might, maybe petitions.
They could get a petition together? You guys gonna march on Indy over this? March on DC?
I don't think the majority of them would do it for $1.
Oh, for $1, that's the problem, right? I don't wanna keep using chalk, but if I were doing this in a classroom, I would write down the words just a buck. It's just a buck, who cares, right? In fact, I would say if Johnny is hanging around people that complain about losing $1, get new friends, right? Because those are not pleasant people to be around. And you probably know people like that, right? Who are just cranks over stuff like $1. Like, dude, shut up, it's $1, who cares? It's not that big of a deal, right? It's annoying, but it's just a buck, who cares? There's a million things that will happen to me today that are more annoying than losing $1. It's not that big a deal. So the public choice economists say that these people are rationally ignorant and apathetic. It's kind of an insult, actually. Rationally ignorant, apathetic. Ignorant means I don't know. Apathetic means?
I don't care.
I don't care. I asked a student that once, and they shrugged their shoulders. I said, exactly, that's right, it's apathetic. Right? So I either don't know, or if I do know, I don't care. Why? It's just a buck. First example I do in my micro class is of our country's sugar policy, which ends up taking about $50 a year from the average family of 4. And I ask my students when I get to this point in the class, what have you done about it? And the answer is always nothing, right? Because even when I take $50 from the average family of 4, they're typically not going to do much about it. And I'm not going to do anything about $1 for sure, right? I'm not going to know about it. Even if I teach it to you in the econ class, you're not going to do anything about it. You don't care. It's $1. Who cares? But, key word, it's rational. Why would you? Why would you bust your tail to learn about something that's taking $1? You're going to read a bunch of articles about this? You got to march on Washington over it? No, it's just $1. Who cares? Right? You're weighing the marginal benefits and the marginal costs of learning and taking action. I don't think so. I'm not going to learn about it. And even if you give me the information for free, I'm not going to do nothing about it. Right? So people are rational. They're ignorant and apathetic, but rationally so. This is the general public. This is you and me. All of us are in this pile. Right? Even a PhD economist who knows all this stuff, I'm not going to do anything about it. I mean, I might write an article because I get rewarded for other reasons, but I'm not going to write the article imagining I'm going to change the world. Right? People are going to be ignorant and apathetic about that. This is the position of the general public. Now, what about this group? Happy, sad. What do they think? Olivia, happy or sad here? Sad to receive $30,000?
Doing good, but
I don't know. How many people would be happy to receive a check for $30,000 in the mail today? Holy cow. I mean, for some of you, many of you, that would be the #1 thing that happened to you this year, to receive a check for 30. Just picture that in the mailbox today, a check for 30 grand. You're like, oh my gosh, right? I mean, there might be 1 or 2 things that would be better than that, but that's a top issue. So you're really happy about it. I'm a little upset, very happy. But what are you going to do about it? What would you do to facilitate this policy? To keep it going, to get it started? What kind of things would you do in the political markets to encourage this sort of activity on your behalf? What do you think? Evan, what would you do?
I don't know. I mean, you get 30 grand, you probably don't want to tell anybody. Like, I mean, you want to probably make sure it's like valid. So
It's valid. Yeah, it's all valid. It's the government. We got crazier programs than this on the books. Yeah, it's valid. So what would you do? What would you do?
I would research why I got the 30 grand.
Who cares? Now you're getting the 30 grand. So what would you do to make the trade happen? To make sure that this legislation gets on the books or stays on the books? Anything?
You want to ensure the funding is coming from something that you think it comes from, like should come from?
Okay, yeah, you might have a real conscience, you might say, where's this money coming from? And you know it's coming from taxpayers, right? You know the government's walking around with a gun, taking $1 from a bunch of people to give you $30,000, right? That's how this works. Well, let me give you a few, right? You'll probably vote for this candidate, the candidates who support you. Right? I mean, you might care about gun control, you might care about bond issue 43, you might care about who's the candidate for a dog catcher or whatever. I mean, you might care about a lot of political issues, but I'll bet you don't care about any issue more than this issue. Right? If Representative so-and-so is for you on this topic, they're my biggest friend. If they're against you on this topic, we got a problem here, right? I want the check for 30 grand. I will vote for you. My friends will vote for you. My family will vote for you, right? Votes are going to be decided on this. We're going to maybe exchange some money. Right? I hear you're in a difficult race. You know, challenger so-and-so is getting after you, and you're like, hey, what, you know, let me send you $1,000, a couple $1,000. Let me help you, right? Because I want to make sure you're in office to defend this necessary policy, right? Got to have this policy. Let me help you out with that. In a third world country, what do we call this? Maybe a bribe, right? In the U.S., we're a little cooler about it. We call it a campaign contribution, right? I'm going to give you some money to facilitate the transaction. There's a thing called lobbying. I want to come up with, and there's good stories. We put these together. So lobbying is I want to come up with good stories, good reasons. I want to get people to help me pass this policy. I want to convince people it's a good idea. I want to convince politicians it's a good idea. Now I will go to Indy and talk to somebody, right? If they're making noise about this, it's worth a trip to Indy to talk to so-and-so about the 30 grand. I'll do that. I'll make a few appointments to talk about my 30 grand. I might hire somebody. Hey, let's all kick in, right? Let's kick in some money and let's hire a feller and he'll go up there and lobby for us, right? He'll go up there and bang on doors for us. That's called lobbying, right? I'm going to put resources into this to make sure that it happens. And I want to come up with good reasons for this. It's kind of nice that well, let me come back to that, all right? So you got this group here, and they're bearing subtle costs. And they're going up against people who are receiving concentrated benefits. There's a lot of cheap talk about democracy these days. Well, let's talk about democracy in this context. Who should win this battle in a democracy? Who should win this vote, Sam?
The top one?
The top one. 300 million should crush 10,000 every day, but who wins the vote? The 10,000. Because the 300 million are doing what? Not paying attention. Right, they're busy mowing their lawns and raising their kids and studying for the econ test and watching Netflix. And it's a buck, bro. I don't care about this. It's not that big a deal. Right, so these people are not paying attention. And who's going to dominate democracy in that context? This group here. We call this group a special interest group. Sometimes econ lingo is kind of wonky. This is actually very friendly. We call them a special interest group because, wait for it, they're especially interested in this policy. Right? This is the policy. This is the one that rocks their world. So the special interest group is going to be all kinds of crazy, putting money into this. The general public's not paying any attention at all. The 10,000 carry the day. Good stories fit into this as well, because what I'd like to do is come up, and it's okay that these people are on the bench not paying attention, but what if I could convince them that this is a glorious outcome? It's good for the country, it's good for the economy, it's good for safety, it's good for something. Now they go from not just being neutral and not paying attention to cheering us on as we take their money. Right? That's beautiful right there. It's a work of art, right? If I get them to cheer, making themselves worse off to help me. And that's what's called good stories, or what I call good stories. And so you find a lot of this in politics. This mechanism explains, I don't know, 80 to 90% of what government does. They take little bits of money from lots of people and then chunk it into a special interest group. So what does this have to do with the topic? Well, notice that the redistribution could be to anybody. And so this is redistribution to the organized. right? It's not whether they need it, it's not whether they deserve it, it's not necessarily any of that, right? I mean, these could be child molesters, but these people aren't paying attention to it, right? I could take $1 from all kinds of people and give it to Bill Gates, what the heck, right? Why not? Because we're not paying any attention anyway. How would we know that that's the way it goes? These are groups who are organized, right? They have organized politically and they're able to take advantage of this mechanism to great effect. A lot of times people focus on redistribution to the poor, and that's fine, but there's also a lot of redistribution to the non-poor. In my chapter, in my book on this, I call it Reversing Robin Hood, because a lot of it is taking from the poor to give to the rich, right? And that's the point that ties back to the title of the talk. How does government do this? Well, think about our farm policy. Right? Our farm policy takes money, it tends to increase the price of food. Who spends more money on food than anybody else as a percentage of their income? The poor. It's called regressive. Farmers tend to be upper income, towards the upper income scale. So we're redistributing money from all sorts of people, disproportionately the poor, to those who are disproportionately wealthy. We have all kinds of trade protectionism for clothing. Again, regressive. Food, clothing, and shelter are things that the poor spend a higher amount of their budgets on. We have all kinds of legislation to make food, clothing, and shelter more expensive. We have our education system, right, which is largely a government-run monopoly. Not the best system especially for the poor who don't have the resources to get out of that. They get terrible outcomes, and so you end up with, again, an organized group that likes things the way they are, and it's at the expense of the general public. We can go on and on with this, whether it's healthcare or K through 12 or food, clothing, and shelter. The government's not trying to hurt the poor here, right? That's not the goal. They're trying to help interest groups, and along the way they're going to hurt average people, but many times they're disproportionately harming the poor. All right, so this is the mechanism that comes out of public choice. A couple of thoughts here before we move on to the third point. If the key is the hard to see cost, right, because this is what keeps people not paying attention. If you make the cost too obvious or too irritating, then you can't continue to do this. So one way around this is if the people you give it to are deemed as desirable, needy, right? And so that's why redistribution to the poor doesn't really get people that upset because they're perceived as needy, right? But if otherwise, if the recipients are not particularly sympathetic, then I've got to keep those costs subtle. So think about some of the examples here, right? The costs tend to be subtle when they're put into the long run. When you take macro, you'll talk about inflation and debt. Government prefers to finance things with inflation because it's subtle. Government prefers to use debt because we're going to pay for it down the road sometime. I don't pay for it now, right? That's annoying to us. If the costs are put into the future, that's a way to keep those costs as subtle as possible. Think about the nature of political rhetoric, right? A lot of inflating of the benefits. Let's not talk about the costs. Let's use euphemisms for the things we're trying to do. Welfare programs, for example, are called income maintenance programs. The Inflation Reduction Act was called the Inflation Reduction Act, even though it could not have reduced inflation. They're going to call things by things that are politically palatable for us. And we're like, I'm not really going to be paying attention to that. Right? We're going to fall prey to those kinds of problems. And again, the idea of good stories here. One of my favorite good stories is they'll talk about how this is good for the economy, right? And it looks on the surface like that could be the case, right? We look at this right here and we go, wow, that created 10,000 jobs. Well, it's good for the economy. But where'd the money come from? It came from here. How much is taking a bunch of money from this group and moving it over here? How much net economic activity is that going to create? Zero. I can't just take money from you guys and I'm going to create economic activity over here to the recipients, but the net of taking money from here and giving to here, that's just a shell game. I'm just moving resources around. But because the job creation here is more obvious and the job destruction here is a few dollars at a time, we don't notice that. And so we imagine that this is going to be somehow good for the economy. This is a net, at best, this is neutral for the economy, right? We're just simply moving resources around. How do you deal with this? Well, you either need the interest group to cut it out, back to your point about having a conscience. So you can hope that interest groups have a conscience and refuse the money. That's one possibility. Good luck there. You could hope the politicians grow a conscience. Well, we're not going to do this anymore. We're feeling really bad about taking your money and giving it to organized political people. We're going to stop that. Good luck with that. Or we can hope the rationally ignorant people wake up. And that's not much better, frankly, because, what are you going to do about it, right? So economists bang our heads on the wall. We do the best we can to help with this. But the bottom line is, right, this is probably your top way to fix this. If the costs are really annoying, then you can get people to get upset and do something about it, but those cases are fairly rare. All right, the other big topic I want to talk about is welfare policy. And this is where government's trying to help the poor, right? So this is a discussion that basically is government's not trying to harm the poor, but they do. They end up causing them higher food, clothing, and shelter. They jack up the market for health care. They cause trouble in K through 12. That's not what they're trying to do, but they inadvertently harm the poor while they help the interest groups. Welfare policy is an attempt to help the poor. And economists call this the welfare dilemma. There is no way to do this generally in a way that is effective in the long term. Let's set up our own welfare program. So let's say we have earned income, and we have a benefit level. We have unearned income, and then total income. So we have unearned, and then you have total income. All right, so let's make a table here. And we'll start here. Let's say that this is let's imagine a scenario where we've got, let's say, a single parent with 2 kids living in suburban Indianapolis. All right, and we're going to get rid of all other welfare programs. This is the welfare program that's going to pay for everything except health care and education. So we'll give them health care and education for free, but this welfare program is going to replace all other welfare programs, and it's going to take care of all of their living expenses when they have no earned income. Either we don't want them to work, or they can't work, or something, right? Single parent, 2 kids, picture, I don't know, 9 and 11-year-old, suburban Indianapolis. How much money do they need to have a reasonable, lower-end lifestyle for the year? How much do they need to live for a year in suburban Indy? Single parent, 2 kids. Anybody got any decent knowledge on this? Any idea what it takes to run a household?
50.
How much?
50,000.
50,000, okay. Any other guesses? There's no right answer here, so.
I was gonna say 50 to 60.
Okay, 50 to 60. I mean, some of you are probably in households where you don't have 50 to 60 in your household, so we're probably going to want to lower that number a little bit. We're looking for the kind of the lowest possible number we can go with, right? Anyone else got a number they want to give us?
43.
43. Wow, that's very specific. All right, let's go. I'm going to go 40. I want to lower these numbers a little bit, so this is not a complete disaster. All right, so I'm sorry, 40,000. My bad. That's right here. 40,000 bucks, right? So if they have no earned income, we're going to give them 40. Their total income is 40,000. Okay. The second thing we got to figure out is now we got a program that's going to be for some people who can work a bit, right? They can work, let's say, part-time or something like that. And we got to make a big decision here. When they earn $1,000, we're going to reduce their benefits, right? Because they don't need as much help from us. So when they earn $1,000, we're going to take away some amount of money. Or should we reduce their benefit by 100 or 300 or 500 or 700? What's our concern as we pick this number? What's our chief concern? As this number gets bigger, what's the problem?
If you take too much money, then they'd rather just not earn it.
They'd rather not work, right? It's an incentive problem. If I take, I don't know, $700, then the net is really $300. You're not working for $1,000, really, you're working for $300. How many of you would work for 30% of your pay? Okay, that's a work disincentive problem, right? So the bigger we make that number, man, do I really want them to work? I don't know. If I'm taking 70% of their income, I don't think I really do want them to work. I kind of want them to work, but I'm not really setting the law in a useful way there. All right, so let's go back to the people I had before. What number do you want here? They earn 1,000. What do you think we ought to reduce the benefits by?
Well, I think they get reduced by 1,000.
But what do we want to try to do if we're setting up a good welfare program? Preserve those work incentives. Johnny, what do you think would preserve work incentives here? Take this much, and I think they'll still probably work. Who's got a number for me? Sam, you got one?
Like, take away 0?
Well, if they was 0, you got awesome, but then this person's always on welfare the rest of their life, right? They're going to keep getting 1,000. So I want to take something away because they don't need as much help when they're making some money. Back row, what do you got? You, yeah. Yeah, what number?
Like how much you take away?
Yeah,
Like $200.
200 bucks. I mean, that would definitely preserve the incentives. All right, somebody else, a couple more numbers. What do you have?
I was gonna say 200, but.
200, all right. Anybody want to argue with 200? It's a terrible welfare program, but I appreciate the effort. Okay, so we got 200 bucks, right? All right, so let's do the math. Every time you earn 1,000, I'm going to take 200. Okay, so I earn 1,000, and what's your benefit level going to be reduced by? Down by 200. So your new benefit level will be what? Lane, you got that? $200 lower. 39.8. Total income 40,800. All right, you earned 1,000. You lost 200. You gained a total really of 800. Right? I got to give you all credit for this because this is a kind, compassionate amount of money. I appreciate that. You have preserved work incentives, but your bottom line is going to be the worst I've ever seen. Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. All right, so let's do it again. If I earn another 1,000, what are my benefits going to be? How many you got? I earned another 1,000.
39.6.
39.6. I'll lose another 200 bucks, right? Now I'm up to 41.6. Well, as you can tell, this is not dropping very fast, and I'm going to run out of space and time. So let me just get to the punchline. There's some algebra here, but it's going to take them getting to $200,000 before their benefits go away under your system. Everyone earning under $200,000 will now be on welfare. You know what I mean? That's a terrible program. That doesn't work, right? I mean, you've just moved the disincentive problems into 95+% of the population. How expensive would this be? Right? You can't do this. All right, we did it on the board, but you can't do this, right? This is a terrible welfare program. So how do you fix this? I mean, you could push down on that a little bit. You could kind of edge this up. But man, it's still not going to get you to a reasonable number.
You put it in brackets.
Huh?
You put it in brackets.
You could do some bracket stuff, but brackets complicated and create problems within the brackets, right?
Oh, sure.
Ceilings and, but again, there's a dilemma. The dilemma is you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Rock and a hard place. There is no answer to this, right? So you can play with that. Maybe there's some ways to make it a little bit better. But the bottom line is you cannot do this, and that. That's not going to work. Way too expensive. Here's what the government does. They don't go quite that wild on that number. They certainly don't do that. What they do instead is they move this to about 800 to 900 bucks. That's the reality. The benefit reduction rate that the federal and state governments allow is on average about 80 to 90%. There are some people, and you may know stories like this, if they work too much, they're actually worse off financially because they lose their health care. Or they're worse off financially because they lose their housing vouchers. They can work and lose more money from the government by working. Now, I might work under that occasion, right? There's more to life than financial incentives. I might work with a 100% benefit reduction rate because I want to be an example to my kids. Or I don't want to be on welfare forever. Or I got a conscience and I don't want to take other people's money, right? You can tell me some stories, but that is not a recipe for generally getting people off welfare when you're taking 80 to 90% of your money. We just did a poll here a minute ago, and you guys said none of you would work for 30%. And now I'm telling you the reality is they get 10 to 20%. And we wonder why they don't work. Here's the other kicker. You tend to get welfare policies when you are not married and you have kids. So what incentives does that provide, right? It's a big incentive towards single-family households, right? You're not allowed to save money, because if you're saving money, well, you don't need our help anymore. Depends on the state, but let's say once you get to $5,000 in the account, they're like, well, you don't need our help anymore. You got $5,000 in the bank. Why would I save over $5,000? Right? Then I'm going to lose all my money. I'm going to lose all my benefits, right? So all of these programs are set up in a way that causes all kinds of trouble for the poor. Charles Murray says that basically the elites change the rules of the game for the poor, not for themselves, right? I don't care about welfare policy for me. This is not an incentive problem for me. It's an incentive problem if you're on the lower income side, if you're on the lower skill side, right? This is a tremendous disincentive problem. And there is just no way around this. How do I help people? How do I pay you to be in a state that's unfortunate without at the same time encouraging you to be in the state that's unfortunate? Think about it this way, right? There's a thing called unemployment insurance that may later be a more reasonable temptation for some of you. They might, if you lose your job, they might pay you as long as you're unemployed. You don't know where that takes you, right? You'll have an incentive to remain unemployed. That's the same thing we're talking about here. If I pay you to be in this state, you're more likely to be in that state. There's no way around that. And economists call that the welfare dilemma. Let me give one more example. James Buchanan coined a term called the Good Samaritan's dilemma. And the Good Samaritan's dilemma adds time to this discussion. So it's based on the biblical story of the Gospel of Luke. And the Good Samaritan's dilemma says that short-run assistance promotes long-run dependence. Short-run assistance promotes long-run dependence. We know this in life, right? What are some examples where you know this in just everyday life? If I help someone, I got to worry about the long run. What's an area of life where we know that's the case? Mason, got one for me?
Like driving someone to school once as
Yeah.
a favor. And
Yeah, I could use a ride, you know? Okay. I don't mind giving rides. I want to be a little careful of that because they ask me again. And then it gets weird, right? But I give the gift and I got to think about the long run. Or they may make me think about the long run. All right, what's another example?
Loaning your friend's money.
Loaning a friend money. There you go. Most of you have probably tried that before, and sometimes, hey, it's perfectly fine, and other times there's kind of a long-run implication of that.
I was going to say like financial crises for individuals.
Yeah, and it's weird because they keep coming up with crises. Isn't that weird, some of these people? I mean, sometimes it literally is a one-time thing and that's it. One ride, it's over. Help out, crisis, it's over. Yeah, that happens, but it's not shocking that it tends to happen again, right? You have to be careful of that. As a parent, I think about this all the time. We're going coaching our kids and, you know, as a parent, right? I mean, back in the day when the kids were little and they're in the grocery cart and they're hungry and tired and we're checking out and they start screaming, it was really tempting to kind of reach over the candy rack and hand over a candy bar and fix the problem. Except I ain't fixing the problem. I'm just postponing the problem. Right? I fixed the problem here, but I just made it a lot worse the next time. If you're not parenting with this in mind, you're a moron, right? If you're coaching people in sports, you think about this. What does it mean for a teacher or a coach to want the best for their students, right, or for their athletes? There's this trade-off in the short run and the long run that's really interesting to play with. And good people can disagree on how you do this, but the reality is the short run and the long run have connections that you need to think about. You want a coach who's going to coddle you? Okay. You're not going to be any good as a player down the road. That's not a good plan. What do you want? You want an easy year or do you want a big life? What do you want? That's the short run and the long run. They say don't feed the bears in the parks, you know? Why is that? Yeah, I don't know if I believe that, but that's what they tell us, right? They say if you feed the bears, they'll become dependent on us and they'll forget how to kill stuff. I'm not sure I believe that, but that's one of the stories. I think the bigger problem is, and maybe you've had this, you go to Gatlinburg and get a cabin, and I think, hey, wouldn't it be kind of fun to put food out for the bears and the raccoons? And I'll take some cool pictures and on. But the problem is, Sam's gonna roll out there next weekend, and the bears and the raccoons are gonna roll out. Sam's not gonna really enjoy what I did last weekend, right? That's a definite problem. If I just gotta lay out food, let's just see what happens. Well, you're creating a pattern there. Your short-run gift is creating a long-run problem. Again, in the context of welfare or charity, how do you do that? How do you help people in practice? If you've tried to really help people, it is tough. Marvin Olasky says, we're stingy with our time, and that's what people in this spot need. They really need our time. Giving somebody $20, or the homeless dude at the exit, I don't know what he's doing, but I'll give him $5. Is it helping him? Maybe. Maybe making his life worse, I don't know. What he needs is my time. A dude needs me to take him to McDonald's and hear his story and figure out what he really needs. Because what he needs is not $5. What he needs is a shower and a job interview, or he needs, whatever. People need all kinds of different things, and me just handing out resources doesn't fix the problem. That may, in fact, make it worse. The Good Samaritan is one that links time to that. And so when we're helping people, this is not a call to not help people, but it is to say, look, government's going to have a hard time doing this well. Government's very wooden and rule-oriented, and people are really complex beings, and rules and wooden arrangements are probably not going to work real well with them. And then again, charity and welfare, the connection of time between the short run and the long run.